I spent all this time doing close-up reviews of figures or unboxings of 4K sets and all that stuff, and the one thing I decided to come back to in front of the camera for is Spider-Man Unlimited. And it's weird that I'm going backwards in my classic reviews of Spider-Man TV shows. We kind of kicked it off somewhat with the Spider-Man 2008 show, The Spectacular Spider-Man, and now we're returning back. I might have been skipping a couple of things, but in the early to that, well, technically late 90s, specifically 1999 to a short-lived ending in 2000, we got a very short stint. I believe it was on Fox Kids Network or so. I might have been wrong, but they gave it a shot of expanding the Spider-Man universe, quite literally, with a new take on the character in a brand new setting in Spider-Man Unlimited. I actually remember catching this show on Disney Channel. This was prior to the Marvel acquisition of Disney, where it was actually shown on Disney Channel very late at night. They wouldn't show it during prime time. That would actually be saved up for like Gargoyles or the 94 Spider-Man animated series, which I was really enamored with at the time. And then I would catch Spider-Man Unlimited thinking I was going to get more of that Spider-Man that I loved, and in the end, the child in me just could not vibe with it. And now thinking back to it, I'm like, wow, there's got to be a reason for why I was not vibing with it. So that's why almost a decade and a half later, I wanted to revisit Spider-Man Unlimited and exactly see why it is that I fell off of the show so very early on, and why exactly did they put it so late at night, and why I just didn't give it that time of day. So now with a much more fully developed brain, and after seeing certain snippets and images of it during my research for Spectacular Spider-Man, I am now giving Spider-Man Unlimited a second shot. So originally going to be developed by Saban in collaboration with Marvel, they kind of fell out, especially when Sony and Marvel were kind of having a deal over the rights of Spider-Man, especially around the time that they were negotiating for the Sam Raimi trilogy, which would then take my love for Spider-Man to a whole new height. Some would say a web-slinging height. And it was during this time that because Saban no longer had control, and this is Saban, like Power Rangers Saban, they did not have full reign of control over the character like they did before, so they couldn't use the original characters or the original designs. So what was their solution? To take Spider-Man and put him in a counter-Earth, as they put it. And in this show, Spidey finds himself in an alternate universe, an alternate reality, and an alternate version of New York that it might as well be the future. Because it's funny, they keep calling it Counter-Earth, and yet it's much more apocalyptic than you would have originally guessed. And it's in this new apocalyptic version of New York City, or at least the world, in which humans, it's pretty much Planet of the Apes. It's Planet of the Apes with Spider-Man playing Charlton Heston, only instead of apes, they're called bestials. Basically, animal, humanoid, it's pretty much a furry's fetish splash all across the screen where you have multiple humanoid animal characters that have now taken supreme control over the food chain, and now humans are seen as the much more demoralized class where they have to live in the slums and all that. And as it progresses, Spidey uncovers a revolution brewing against the Bestials, and you almost can already tell where the plot is kind of heading forward, at least for the overall arc of this first and only season. You can tell that this plot was not exactly where the developers had their heart in. They wanted to tell a like two worlds type of version of Spidey, but have those two worlds kind of mesh. But because they couldn't use that original, they had to stick with that world, and they just tried to milk it as much as they possibly could. Steve Perry. Oh, don't stop believing, Steve Perry. Not only that, but you have the strongest sense of the word, the 2000s vibe, just oozing all over the screen with its very technicolor approach to it, and also, well, I don't want to say technicolor, but this very techno-ish vibe where everybody's got very techno-ish technology, whether it be on their outfits or the way that they're using it, and of course the entire premise of it being a futuristic series, it's very much influenced by the turn of the millennium. And just do not get me started on the music. In fact, I would probably go as far as to say that the music is much more 2000s techno than even the new adventures of Spider-Man or the MTV Spider-Man ever did. Music aside, it becomes very apparent that the creators of the show that wanted to go with that other direction just kind of had the carpet pulled right from under them, because it's just a bad premise, really. Because, yeah, like I mentioned, I did the comparison to Planet of the Apes, but it really doesn't get any deeper than that. And they had some opportunities to go in some really newfound territory that would have been interesting, which they kind of do from time to time. However, the overall substance of the entire season, the reason for why I would probably go from episode to episode, just doesn't hold as well as it would have been in that original Earth. Because when you go to this counter Earth, this is your chance to give us something new, and instead you give us a very tired plot. And maybe in the late 90s it would have been a little fresher, but even then, it's rather dull. This whole arc with the revolutionaries, led by a very unsuspecting not J. Jonah Jameson, no, but John Jameson, who finds himself stranded in this counter Earth just as much as Spidey is, it just becomes tired because it's just generic. There's nothing surprising about it. From episode to episode, they tackle certain themes and certain plots that you've seen from other shows outside of the Spidey world that you're like, oh, well, they just took that and planted it here. You have one episode that deals with a werewolf type of storyline coming out of nowhere, but then you kind of go to another one where you have a character go rogue, and then you have this other character who's got a backstory to him that, sure, I can kind of sympathize with, but I'm just like, I don't know. There's got to be something missing. There's a reason for why I'm not gelling with these characters as I did with those beloved ones from that original 94 series, or even from the comics. Something that even this show tried to kind of jump into, but even those comics didn't manage to sell it well enough to continue the arc from that point. Plus, there's always that adage where Spider-Man is just as great as his villains that he's fighting. The villains are shit in this. I was just getting so annoyed by them. There was nothing cool about them. They were given some really weird designs where one of them looks like a bear, the other one looks like a ram, the other one, even the show gets kind of self-referential when Spidey even makes Tony the Tiger jokes about the leader here who looks like Tony the Tiger, or at least not the main leader, but at least the leader of these henchmen that go forward trying to stop his schemes that are very terrible at it. And their voices don't exactly do anything to kind of warm me up to the character, especially the Ram guy. His voice was just getting on my fucking nerves. And there was just no dimension to these villains at all. They would do the exact same thing in almost every episode, and it was just getting repetitive. And when these moments kind of came about of boredom, I would either find myself checking things on my phone, detracted from something that's Spider-Man related, and you know how hard that it is for me to do because I love Spider-Man, I love the character. Look, I'm wearing shirts, I have multiple shirts, and yet I was just not connecting to the show at all as the plots kind of developed, and you got these characters going missing, and Spidey just trying to save the day the same way he would in the prior episode. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, you know what would have been probably a little bit more awesome, but still kind of tackled similar subject material, is Spider-Man 2099. But at least there we would have had an excuse. It wouldn't be a counter Earth, it would actually be Earth from the future. And it wouldn't have even been Peter Parker as their central character, it would have been O'Hara. His last name is O'Hara. I can't remember his first name, but his last name was O'Hara, and he would be the Spider-Man of the 2099 future. And I think that would have had better resonance because at least I wouldn't have the subconscious thought of me saying, wow, this is still Peter Parker, just taking him and putting him in the new element, and it's just not working. Whereas in the future, you at least wouldn't have needed to kind of literally counter everything from the normal Earth with the villains and stuff like that.
And his agility and sense of balance are indeed remarkable.
He is a formidable opponent, I assure you.
Of course he is, Knight!
See? Fake. Discount craven ass. And therefore the comparison would have been like, well, these revolutions, just get rid of that entire subplot and just kind of make this the norm. Make this future world normal for that area that it's in, so that when shit happens, it's like, well, okay, now I'm accepting this as the norm. Whereas here, Spider-Man is just constantly saying, I need to get back to Earth. I need to get back to Earth. The Spidey 2099, he wouldn't be, constantly thinking, I need to get back to Earth, I need to get back to Earth. That is his Earth. So we, as the audience, would accept that as the normal. There's no disconnect if that happens. Here, we're looking at the Earth, or at least this counter Earth, and I'm just thinking like, oh, here's that fake ass Earth, that fake ass shit. Get out of here, let's go back to Earth. Especially when the beginning of the very first episode lets us know that Spidey originally was in the original New York with Mary Jane Watson, everybody else. You had the characters you love. You even have a little moment, not to ruin this for anybody, you even have a moment where they play that original 94 SpiderMan theme. That was badass, only to switch it to that techno shit. And it just kind of envelops what you're kind of going into with Spider-Man Unlimited. Now, is it an entire shitfest? No, it's not exactly the worst thing imaginable. I wasn't grinding my teeth because let's break down the entire center character, the entire reason for why you're watching this whole thing. The guy who takes up half of the title of the show. Spider-Man. How is he in this show? It's obviously a different voice actor than the one from the prior show, the 94 series. You got a completely different look. You have a completely different costume that I'm just going to spoil my opinion right here, right now. I hate this costume. I really do. Not only do I hate the design with the fucking cape. What does Spider-Man need a cape for? What does he need a cape for? It makes no sense. It's bad enough that I have to deal with the costumes that he had, where he had the webbings right here looking like a flying squirrel. No cape, like Ed Mo said, no capes. Besides the cape, I don't like the whole concept of nanotechnology. It's one of the reasons for why I can't get excited for the new costumes in the current MCU. As much as I love the recent Marvel movies, most especially Infinity War, one of my biggest pet peeves of Infinity War are those snap-on, snap-off costumes that both Iron Man and Spidey have, where the helmets just go zip, zip, or Black Panther zip, zip. I don't like that. I liked it better when they genuinely suited up. So to see Spidey kind of be the pioneer of this with 99 Spider-Man Unlimited, where he just activates his nano, plus the nano things, the way he achieves to get this technology even prior to going to Counter-Earth just did not make any sense. Now, again, going back to my original solution, if this was 2099 Spidey, that would have made much more sense. However, the heart of the character, the reason for why I love Spider-Man so much, he's actually not that bad here. I will say that from time to time, he would quip a little too often, where I'm like, okay, can we have a breather from the jokes, please? And the way that he would save the day, like I have mentioned before, would get kind of repetitive. I don't know how many fucking times this guy kept resorting to his spider tracker. Spider tracker, he would track everything.
A spider tracer will have to do. But with this spider tracer on the job, I'll be able to find you when I've evened up the odds. You may get out of sight, but not out of mind. Just let me hit that puppy with the spider tracer.
But when it came down to it, the heart of the character was actually still there. The Peter Parker that we know and love was still there. There was never a point where I hated him. I actually enjoyed watching him on screen. Multiple times, he actually did manage to make me laugh with a couple of the quips. Like I said, I felt like he was quipping a little too much, where his hit and miss ratio was a little higher than past Spider-Man that I have watched, both in live action and cartoon.
Ah! Nice move, Webhead. Now you know what a wrecking ball feels like. If I wanted to ride the Tilt-A-Whirl, I'd have gone to Coney Island.
And though Counter-Earth was meant to counteract the original Earth by swapping up the animals with the humans and to try to give some form of commentary there were a couple of characters that they added a unique twist to that I was like, actually, I want to see more of this. This is actually kind of different. I'm open to it. It's just a shame that they were literally in like 1 or 2 episodes. Why did you not extrapolate more on this than on the ordinary revolutionaries? And characters such as this Earth's version of the Green Goblin, this Earth's version of Vulture, and even Jameson himself, who became the leader of these revolutionaries, those were chances that the developers and the creators of the show took, and I actually really enjoyed. My personal favorite was Green Goblin. I really wish that I could have seen a fluid relationship build between this version of the Goblin and Spider-Man, and maybe at some point, because I'm a morbid motherfucker, what it would have been like if that would have kind of led to a tragedy where they did become the usual Goblin and Spidey, but because they started at this unique point, it would have been much more tragic and would have probably felt more for it. That would have been really cool. And also, Venom and Carnage, for some rather dumb reason, even for a cartoon, it was really dumb to kind of include them in this show from that first episode, and the reason for them being on this Counter-Earth is just, don't get me started. However, it did lead to a rather cool episode towards the very end. It was like the second or third to last episode of the entire season that really centered on Venom and Carnage in a different way than they were prior to those episodes prior. And it was actually a really decent episode that made me feel for both Venom / Eddie Brock. And I think what really made it cool is that it didn't focus so much on this revolution going up against the Bestials and this really generic villain known as the high evolutionary, whatever the hell. I'm not even gonna spend time on him. But what they did with Venom, I was just wishing that the show would do more of that, like really spend time with these counter versions of the heroes. Sure, it's heroes that we've seen before, but at least what they were doing with them, it was working. Why did they not go for more of that? Probably because there was an extent of what Marvel was allowed to do because of the whole Sony Marvel deal that they had going. Now, being that this is a cartoon, not live action, you expect the animation to be at least up to par, especially since this is a much more recent show than even the 94 series was. Now, there wasn't a humongous gap, so I can't say that the animation is top-notch. There's an awful lot of choppiness or some shots that are actually rather weird to watch, especially towards the back half where you can kind of tell that maybe they were running out of the budget. So they were kind of lingering on certain shots or certain animations that were just really weird, but at least they made for some hilarious moments.
Or would you like me to add the mind of a bestial to this mix?
What is he shooting at? But truthfully, I can say that the design work, not so much, well, maybe not the designs of certain of the characters, especially those Bestials, but the actual coloring and sketching of this world and this version of New York, and also some of the side characters, whether they be human or bestial, it was actually done rather well. You know, it wasn't like they just colored in a couple. Like, I have to give it up to some of these artists for making some of the colors and some of the textures really pop, because whenever the animation would be at a still and I would actually see some of these images like the way I would look at a comic book panel, it actually kind of popped in a very really good way. When it started to move, that's when I had some issues where I was like, a couple more frames would have been better to make this feel a little less stilted. But at least I can say that some of the animators that had to do with the coloring and the sketching, I have to give them props. But when I say that the budget was running out towards the end, it really did run out. Not only in the art department where they were cutting some frames and layering on some shots. Whoa, hold the fuck up. That was a lightsaber sound. But also, they ran out of the story because they performed the cardinal sin of ending their first season on a goddamn cliffhanger. And it's not even a cliffhanger like maybe not, because it's okay to leave certain things up for interpretation at the end of your first season in case you do get renewed for season 2. You want to leave the door open slightly ajar so that you can explore some new ground territory. So if you get canceled, at least you wrapped up your main arc, but at least and some of those open things didn't take that much of a priority. Yeah, no, they literally snipped it at the end with a legit cliffhanger that you just don't do. You don't do that as your season finale, especially when you don't know if you're going to make your money back to be able to warrant another season, especially when your show is a cartoon. All right? Because no matter what day you're in, especially back in the late 90s when a cartoon was a little bit more expensive to produce than it is now. Now you got computers to help you out. I mean, fucking Family Guy just recycles the same thing over and over. Here, they had to animate. I was giving props to those animators. You have to animate every single frame. And of course, that takes time and that takes budgets. That takes money. You can't risk ending your first season on a cliffhanger the way that this show did, when not knowing that the budget is going to take up a little bit too much, that maybe a season 2 is nowhere near in the cards. And because of that, whoever did in fact end up loving this show is going to be immensely disappointed when they get to the final scene of the last episode, because it's literally the type of cliffhanger you expect from a 2-part finale, and you wait for that second episode just around the corner to wrap things up. Yeah, there was none. Frankly, I can say for myself that I wasn't necessarily heartbroken because of all the problems I was having with the show. but that's just another demerit to add to the show of ending on a cliffhanger like this, because you couldn't even go through with a legitimate ending because you were probably so overconfident that you thought you were able to put that as your season 2 premiere. Except thinking from the much more level-headed decision of laying the groundwork for a sound season 1 to get things going. And instead, yeah, I don't know what happened. Maybe, like I said, they ran out of the budget, or they got overconfident, or maybe there was an issue with the whole Sony Marvel merger. Whatever the case, there was definitely an issue from the get-go that I don't think should have been come to pass, but at least they probably thought to themselves, the creators of the show, the writers and directors, like, hey, we love Spider-Man, we want to do something with the character, let's at least try. And I guess points for trying, but sometimes trying just isn't enough. I know that sounds terrible, but it just isn't enough, especially when you have a character with as much history as it even did back in '99, such as Spider-Man. And Spider-Man Unlimited is just one of those bumps that I guess we kind of have to get through to look back at and go, okay, let's not do that again. So I guess in that sense, it's a necessary evil. Now, it's not utter shit. Like I said, there's some diamonds on the rough, such as unique character versions of these characters and people that we've grown to love over the past 30 years, from the 35 years from the time of Spider-Man's creation in the 60s to when the show came about in the late 90s, early 2000s. And again, some of the animation, when it's standing still, is pretty good, and Spider-Man himself is not a complete lost cause, but Spider-Man Unlimited is one of the examples to not do Spider-Man, but it's not exactly the worst just yet. Yeah, there was still some time for that to come to pass. So I'm going to be giving Spider-Man and Unlimited, and I almost fucked that up, just like the creators did this to that. Anyways, I'm going to give it a low 6 out of 10. It's not the worst thing ever, but man, oh man, I knew I had to get to this to at least reevaluate my overall consensus on Spider-Man Unlimited. And I feel like I did it right. Never have to go through that again. And I think us as Spider-Man fans, whether we want to continue watching Spider-Man shows or want to create brand new Spider-Man shows, can take in stride from the mistakes that were made with Spider-Man Unlimited. So, please let me know in the comments below, have you guys watched Spider-Man Unlimited? Do you remember catching it as a kid? Have you rewatched it recently? Are you actually fans of the show? If you are, you're not wrong. Nobody's wrong or right here. This is just one man's or one Spider-Man fan's opinion on this show. Please let me know your guys' opinions in the comments below. Make sure you like and share this video to show some support for your homie here. I'm sorry that I just said homie, you don't have to do that, but in case you guys like this review and would like to see more, please hit subscribe. I'm hoping to catch some more Spider-Man cartoons or some cartoons in general that I want to do classic reviews on, and I'll hopefully bring them to you guys in the near future. So stay tuned for those, and thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. I don't know if at this point they managed to incorporate mocap, but the way they run, or the way it's like they didn't get the proper people to interpret some of these folks. There's a couple scenes where Peter has to run and he just has like the most wimpiest run, and it just did not translate very well.
Parker! That's the third call I got about giant lizards running amok in Gramercy Park. Giant lizards! Pronto!